All right, another totally rewarding chat. Continuing our stretch, we're going to do some math. How many people we have spoken to outside of the U.S. versus inside the U.S.
Yeah.
Since we have Giac today. We also have Paul. Paul continues to keep showing up. I'm just keep waiting for the day that he's had enough. Nice background, by the way.
Yeah, it's still there. It's
I
still
know.
there. It hasn't
Yeah.
changed. Yeah.
How's it going, Giac?
It's good. Pretty good. It's almost 1 o'clock here in the UK, 1 or 2 hours to go. So perfect timing for this webinar.
Well, it would have been cooler for those on the video if you had wine or beer while you were there instead of just talking about it like,
Yeah,
that is what we get for scheduling this on a Friday afternoon.
that is
UK
true.
time.
Actually, we should be like, actually, the question on your Friday afternoon is like, why aren't you already started? Is probably a bigger question.
Yeah, and for British standards, I'm indeed behind because it
Yeah.
starts at 11 a.m. on a Friday. Typically,
Yeah.
the pubs will be buzzing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, for those who don't know you, so that I don't screw it up, both your name and your bio, can you give us that and toss in at the end how we'll be able to have people find you. We'll link over so you don't have to cover that, but give your bio and what you got going on now.
sure. And that's probably the most challenging part, Sean. I've resigned from my corporate job a month ago, and I decided to enter a new chapter of my life as a solopreneur. So I'm in the process of building my own business. As a matter of fact, I just signed up to Google Workplace, and I've got a business email now, which gives me some form of credibility.
You're legit.
Yeah. So yeah, really building a business which has two sides of the coin to it. One is your reward consulting, compensation consulting, and building on my last 6 years of experience working with startups and scale-ups, both in-house and consulting. That's sort of the sweet spot for me. I want to work with people, teams, just drowning in spreadsheets and, knocking on my door asking me what to do. That's the kind of vibe that keeps me awake because I keep on telling myself I want to do something quiet. I want a quiet life. And then from the frying pan to the fire. So there's no better place than startup and scale ups to have that kind of life because you chose it. I mean, I didn't choose to go into compensation, but now I'm choosing to stay in the fire because it feels good. And on top of that, I am later this year going to launch a community for people in Total Rewards that are not just interested in knowing about AI, they want to see it. They want to get together and build together. Because yes, vibe coding is reaching feels like HR and compensation too. And yes, we can talk about all the limitations and all the risks about it, and I'm sure we will. But there's also a good opportunity to augment your role and automate some tasks with vibe coding without necessarily buying software. I mean, you can always buy software. I'm not one of those that, claims that SaaS is dead. I mean, last year we said consulting is dead, and where are we now? Consultants are thriving. 2026. I don't, that's quite of a long bio, but I hope it being able to.
Well, so actually, there's two things to quickly say in there. First of all, how did you get into comp? Because you said it in the same way that most people say that they got into comp. So how did you end up in compensation?
Yes. So great memories. So first I graduated. I was an economist by background. And my first job was in finance. It was a general lecturer in finance. And after 6 months, I realized, and I love the Excel spreadsheets. I love building formulas, but I'm sitting at a desk all the time. I'm not in meetings a lot. I'm not like interacting with humans. I want to do something different. And if you're thinking, oh, he's going to say now he chose this job because he loves to work with people. No, that's not my case. And I always feel a bit skeptical when people say that. What happened before jumping onto comp, I went to Brazil for 3 months and had the best time of my life. And then I realized, oh gosh, like I'm unemployed again. So now I need to figure out what I want to do. And I sent a speculative CV to a company called Hey Group, which they invented the first job evaluation methodologies, you probably know. Didn't know what to expect. It kind of felt aligned with what I wrote in my dissertation. Alliance benefits, partnership benefits, and control mechanisms. So there was a human element, but I honestly had no idea what the job was about. then I started doing some research and I said, okay, this is cool. I can run with that. So I got invited to a first interview. And the interviewer asked me, you got a cow. Tell me how you're going to make money. Like, what the heck? Is this the right question for a compensation job? So I almost like walked away. And then, however, I thought, now I get it. They are asking me how I can break down a problem into its components, find trade-offs, and understand the economics of business, which is, it is also what pay decisions are about. They are economics, but they're also about conflict of interests, trade-offs, tough conversations with other humans. And that is the beauty of comp. So yes, I didn't choose comp, but I chose to stay in comp in very different shapes and forms. Consultant, in-house, and now solopreneur.
It's interesting. I didn't choose to get in comp. I just can't get out. You, I shouldn't say that out loud. I like it. I dig it, but it is kind of funny. Like different perspectives. It is kind of a it does kind of draw you in to that point of like, at first you're like, how do you get in? And you're like, I remember my first gig at Mercer and getting in the benefit space, and they're like, do this stuff, and I'm like, I guess, sure, I'll build this thing. And then I'm like, I got sucked down the vortex of like, how cool are benefits? And then I'm like, how did that happen? I can't believe those words came out of my mouth. And then you're just here. Also, just a moment of silence for you two, or mad props to you guys. I'll throw a little shine your way. Quitting your job and starting your own thing. Two out of three of us are brave enough to do that. We won't mention any names for the other one. But there's no way I could do that. So I really give you guys all the credit for believing in that and like pulling the ripcord on that and doing that. That's actually super cool.
Yeah, kudos to you, Giac. And moment of silence for my camera, apparently, too. I indeed do have a face made for audio podcasts, and it's becoming true today because I think my camera literally just fried. So apologies for people who don't get to look at my smiling face anymore.
Is it really apologies? Now people, Spotify is good again. So.
That's right. The internet is better with my camera not working. I think that's true.
All right, speed round for you, Giac, before we get into the good stuff. So are you a coffee or tea person?
The lame answer is I'm both, depending on the hour of the day. But if I had to choose, I am a coffee person for survival reasons, not because of taste. Like, if I don't drink coffee, I am worse. Like, you look at my IQ, it's worse than a person with Down syndrome. I desperately need some coffee at least 2 or 3 times a day, and that's part of the adventure.
We won't ask if you're a coffee snob then.
Clearly not.
Yeah, just more caffeine. So the location that you would like to visit for vacation or whatever that you haven't been to yet, what's on your number one bucket list?
Well, look, I'd love to answer this question, but there's my wife on the other side of the room, and the question is kind of irrelevant because I don't get to choose where we go on vacation. So there's no point in me even imagining, like even dreaming about a place. But because, you asked, I think it's fair to a place where I haven't been yet.
That you're allowed to dream for all of 5 seconds. So bring it on. Live it right now.
Philippines.
Okay. And by the way, as someone who, did I meet my wife 40 years ago or something like that? I appreciate the position you're in, that you just don't need to worry about it. So take it as a plus. You don't have to worry about where you're going.
That's right.
Yeah. Like, the trade-off is pretty simple. I don't need to choose, but I don't need to plan either. So you want to go where you want to go.
There you go.
Yeah. You have a weekend away, which we realize at this point in time, this question is going to be moot.
We should just ask your wife.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So you have a weekend away. You have a weekend away. Would you prefer to have a posh weekend away or go rough it in the woods camping?
I would like to spend my weekends surrounded by nature, with some good friends, a fire, a good bottle of whiskey. Yeah. That's
nothing bad can happen after the as someone who lives out where the rednecks and whatever goes, nothing bad ever happens with fire and whiskey. That's a combination built for success.
Well, I guess you're right. It's good defense against wild animals, though.
Yeah.
You know? I mean,
Sure.
assuming you're not the wildest of them
Yeah.
all. You know?
Or self-cooked.
Yeah.
Your wine of choice.
I'm biased here. I'm being an Italian. So yeah, thanks to my 8 years I spent 8 years in London. So I branched out, but my favorite wine is still an Italian wine, Brunello di Montalcino, which is from Tuscany. It's a wine that takes about 6 to 8 years to craft. So it comes with a little bit of a price tag, and it has Sangiovese grapes, and has that sort of aftertaste of wooden barracks, barrel.
Barrels. Yeah.
Yeah, barracks. Let's keep in those. Yeah. So yeah, but really tough to choose one, I'd say. But yeah, Brunello is probably my favorite.
So we'll go the exact opposite direction from that high quality answer to, do you prefer crunchy or creamy peanut butter?
I think this has become a recurring theme now.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I like it smooth.
Okay.
I like it smooth, yeah.
Okay.
Although I'm more of a Nutella fan. I don't know if you have Nutella in the US.
Sure. So it's we've noticed, obviously, it's a very US centric, thing, peanut butter, and so the fact that you had an answer actually is somewhat surprising. And then the question Paul started asking follow up when people are like, we don't really have it here. What is your
Right. What's the
favorite
equivalent
bread of choice? So Nutella, I won't lie. The thing with peanut butter is I can rationalize it's healthy for me. The thing with Nutella is I cannot rationalize that it is good for me.
Yeah. And you don't put Nutella in your smoothie every morning.
No.
You'd be probably.
Well, you should.
I know. Yeah.
Welcome to This Meeting Should Have Been a Podcast, where we take on workplace issues from a skewed angle.
No corporate buzzwords, you quiet quitters.
And no strategic KPIs or dashboards.
Get out of here. We're talking company culture, leadership, workplace.
Guests who've lived through the chaos.
So forget those slide decks. We're candid, clever, hopefully useful.
We'll see you outside the boardroom. Go Lakers.
Don't wear that. No, get out. Don't even wear that hat.
So let's get into the good stuff. So with everything you're seeing in the market, when you got out, what is the top thing you're seeing in the market right now? Like, where would you want to start if you were evaluating the market and what's trending?
I see tension. Not to start with something that has a negative connotation. I actually think there's some good aspects of the tension, but I see tension because what I'm seeing is on the vendor side, not every company, but many vendors are rushing to get something out there that they can brand with AI. It takes time, right? We all know that it's not just about choosing the model, but it's also about training and getting a good business case. But most important of all, it's about asking yourself, are you introducing AI for the sake of introducing AI, or are you actually solving a business problem and improving your solution, right? So I said many before, but I should say some. Some vendors rushing. Some are doing really well at that. Some they have more of a fragmented strategy. And that's not the tension though. Like, this is on the vendor side. The real tension is with the buyer side, where I don't see the same amount of excitement in getting your hands on AI. I mean, everyone's asking about what tools exist out there, but there's a lot of confusion, a lot of buyer confusion as to how to approach this. I might have mentioned that I've run some user research interviews, and the most mentioned words that I hear are, I feel stuck. I don't know what I don't know. There's no one else in the company I can speak to. I mean, not about AI in general, about AI adoption in comp. And so there's this belief by many comp people that they are behind the AI wave, but what they actually are, they're not behind, because most people are exactly in the same stage. They are stuck. They're approaching it from a different lens. Instead of thinking, right, I have like, they're thinking in this way. I have a new capability. It's called AI. Now I need to go out and find problems that I can solve with it. Whereas what we typically do is we know very well that we have a problem, and then we decide, right, AI is the right solution for that, right? And I think what is causing this tension is that companies I spoke to are being asked by their boards, who are asking their chiefs, show us how you're going to implement AI in the business, right? And they're asking each department leader, and it has cascaded down to the head of rewards as well. So they need to prove something, but they don't know where to start. And I think the real message to get out there is you know exactly where to start because you've been doing this for decades. You know what feedback you got from your stakeholders at your last merit cycle, the last time you approved an offer, the last time you had to do benchmarking. You know exactly where the pain points are. So start from there and see if AI could help augment your role and deliver a better outcome for your stakeholders. So that is what I define as a tension. Buyers being stuck while vendors moving very rapidly.
Yeah. If I could real quick follow-up question related to that. I think how much have you heard in some of those discussions with buyers? Like we refer to AI like it's the Force in Star Wars, right? Like it's this nebulous, like ethereal thing, like it's AI and you can't see me doing my Jedi hand wave. But like, whereas AI is a really big concept and it actually is a lot of different things on the ground, right? So I guess talk a little bit about what you're hearing there. Like, do people understand the flavors of AI, the use? I mean, that's where I'm feeling some of it, but I'm curious what you've heard as you've been talking to folks. Like, is AI too big to know where to get started sometimes?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, there's no single definition of AI. When I asked, during the interviews, what do you think AI is? I always get different answers. Some people say it is a chatbot where I ask questions and it does some research for me. Others say it is an agentic platform that automates some of the work that I'm now doing. So very different. And to your point, yes, they're both different forms of AI. I tend to classify AI as either something you bolt on, workflow, something you embedded in, or a completely new AI native rebuild. Like very different types of AI with different levels of complexity. So yeah, there's no definition of AI, but I think the ones that are getting it right, they see it as a feature that you embed within an existing workflow to either expedite the workflow or get better value out of it. So it's not just about speed, but also it's about value, like extrapolating insights that you wouldn't have extrapolated by yourself. So yeah, very different replies and like thoughts and responses I'm getting from in the interviews. The interviews
Do you
I
think they're
conduct so
stuck
far.
not getting the education? Because I think when I'm on market, we end up spending time on, generative versus agentic versus other stuff. Because I think, and how those get tied together, and then out of left field, because not necessarily a comp problem, but you get like the eightfold thing, right? So that comes up, and that just freaks them out. And the one thing that I will defend the comp teams on, in particular, from the consumer side, is you can't make mistakes, right? So if you're in, if you're on the dev side and you have a bug or something, you just fix the bug. You screw up everyone's payroll for a week or a year, like, you're not nearly as popular as the cool guy testing new stuff in dev. So like, I think there's some of that too, Giac, that kind of presses against the knowledge, but also like, it's not a place you want to make mistakes.
For sure. And part of the reasons why they're stuck is also the fear of making mistakes. We all know we work in a domain that's high stakes and everyone has an opinion about comps. So we really don't want to mess things up. What I would argue, though, especially with people that feel afraid, is look, there's a huge chunk of compensation work that your team does every week that never nearly touches a pay decision. Think about the amount of data amalgamation, aggregation that you do if you're pulling, market data from different sources. And yes, they might like the primary, competitor of contact vendors is still Excel, right? So many of them are still Excel. Think about all that work. Survey reconciliation, data aggregation, job matching, scenario modeling for budgeting. That is not a high risk AI work. It is tedious work. By living in fear, you're leaving a productivity unlock opportunity on the table. Now, that's not to say that there are some use cases, pay equity, reconciliation, for instance, that you absolutely need to be more careful with. We don't want to see automation in the sense of removing the human from the decision there. We'd rather want to see augmentation, which is keeping them in the loop, right? But that, the fact that you need to be very careful with AI for certain tasks, and that the notion of truly agentic AI, I'll say something bold, will never take place for these tasks because we simply cannot get rid of the human in the loop. It's just too dangerous. Despite all of this is true, that should not be an excuse not to start experimenting. And to your point, why are people so stuck? I think the main reason is, again, they're being pressurized by the top. They're being asked, start doing something, but they're not being told how to go about it. And this is probably one of the biggest innovations that we've seen since the dot-com bubble with internet. Yes, we had big data 5 years ago. We had machine learning earlier. But the pace of change is different this time. Every day we hear something new, and it's polarizing. And it's, even for someone like me, I read about AI every day. It is a lot to take. So I can only imagine for people that read maybe once a week or a month, how it might be. But don't let that, and this has become more of a life coaching session, don't let that, don't let that discourage you from starting experimenting, because there are some other use cases which is very safe, not risk-free, but very safe to start experimenting with AI.
Yeah. That's the advice I've always been giving people is, what should I do first? Something is the answer, right? It doesn't mean throw your entire census file into ChatGPT and ask what it says. That's not the right something, but draft a job description, see what happens. If you haven't tried to vibe code your own app just to do something, do it. Yeah. It's not going to be great, but that's not the point, right? You learn a lot about what's possible, what's not through experimentation. And then you'll have a better sense of, what workflow problems, to your exact point, what's that thing you've been doing that, I might be able to actually make this a lot better, whether it is workflow automation, true, get me out of it because the robot can do it all, or decision drafting or content drafting, all of those use cases work. You just got to know it's not going to get this right. I have to look out for this. How do I then teach it to use that better next time? You learn all that through experimentation. So the right answer is always do something. And then it's a question of, how do I apply that something that I've now learned to a real problem?
Yeah, I've told a bunch of people this. I found the best way, because obviously you don't want to take your census data or anything, is I went in and in a couple different tools had them create 100-person SaaS software company in traditional, spans, layers, and average salary. And being the grown up that I am, I made my CEO of Acme company, Wile E. Coyote, and everyone needed to be named after Warner Brothers characters. And while it was fun to watch even little things so you learn a lot about the data, right? All 18 software engineers came back with exactly the same base pay, right? That doesn't happen. There's just stuff, and you have to go randomly create things, to your point, Giac. You start to create how the data works, but you also realize how generative it is. It actually put Bugs Bunny in charge of sales Pepe Le Pew, the skunk, was in charge of customer support. Like Claude was actually pretty creative. And now you can go back and keep creating these scenarios and building it out. And you really learn the limitations of what happens, right? With the tool. And then you have this fake company that you can really go mess up, to your point, Jack. There's no risk. Like none of my cartoon characters, Scooby-Doo, who was leading development, did not care if he got a good merit increase or not. Surprisingly, those who know know the whole Scooby-Doo show, it put Shaggy as his direct report, which I didn't know that's how that actually worked.
Turnabouts, fair play.
I know. I did not know. I didn't know how that went. But it was really interesting because then you could create this, and you do realize there are bounds with this. And to your point, Jack, it really highlights things like, I do need to create some boundaries, or I do need to add the art and the science. And actually, there's a lot of variability that it's not prepared to handle yet. And so it's a really cool way, I found, while being a child, to go back in and do that. It also gives you a data set, Paul, to your point, to vibe code against, right? Mm-hmm. So actually write me a merit modeling software tool that does this. And then you realize there's bounds there.
Absolutely.
How are you seeing companies like, so you got this tension, right? And generally, having been at a software vendor my entire life, I basically go by the premise of, since they're paying me money, I've never been anywhere with free software. So since they're paying us money, it's our job to alleviate that tension. So I like the word that you've got there, the tension. How are you seeing companies try to bridge that gap or loosen the tension between, we have AI and like, I don't really understand it?
Well, there are not many good examples of this yet, right? Because I think what companies are trying to do is, well, first, they're trying to get people to experiment, right? But at some point, you want to move from experimentation to execution. And to get there, the smartest companies have realized that humans love frameworks, because the frameworks gives you something they can use to make decisions, even if it's along the way and you don't know the variables. You have like a playbook, a starting point, an infrastructure you can use consistently. It might not generate accurate outputs, to Paul's, comment earlier, but you're still there in the loop. You have a framework, and you know that you can intervene and decide to go a different way if you don't like what the AI output is telling you. But you would know all of this and how to move only if you had a framework. So the real gap between the initial exploration phase and execution is really a governance gap. And it's where I see the smartest companies intervening. They are providing AI specific training for teams so they know how to, what actions they can take at each step. And it is not a tool problem, because the tools exist and they're already there. It is a change management problem. It's the lack of these frameworks. Think about simple things. For instance, the need to reiterate that you need documented decisions as part of a process so you can learn from your previous failures. Can be applied in talent acquisition, but can also apply to exit surveys. So it's really where things are failing is in that delegation that we talked about, where companies are expecting leaders to act without giving it a proper framework. And what is happening, not across the board, but in some companies, we do see that experimentation going on, but it's all bottom up with no consistency. Whereas if there was an AI, decision framework, it would feel less like creative experimentation and more like execution. Maybe it's deliberately not that way yet, because some people may see this as a new toy rather than a new tool. And I think I've heard this before from Paul in a previous webinar. But it is true. So, they don't want to screw the fun by setting up rules and hopping on a framework, because it's just more delightful to play with a tool. But eventually, if you want to generate value and start doing real work with AI, eventually you will have to adopt a framework and start training your managers on how to use this decision framework.
The governance piece, though, is always a piece that was always kind of interesting to me, because if IT governs, right, and you do it at a high level, they're going to make it really tight. And so this is where I think there's tension there as well, right? So you think about, I have a specific thing in comp. It's a wide array of stuff I need to do. Comp and payroll, of course, they touch data that freaks IT out, right? And so I get a little worried if it actually starts from the top down, because the top down is going to start in the C-suite. And coming from IT, I hate to say this, but IT will get involved, and IT will be like, let's make this the safest possible for all use cases. And now what? Right? I also think there's some tricky parts to that. And maybe it's the framework with the external pieces, because this is really on the vendor now, right? I mean, someone can raise their hand or send me a note if they're still running on-prem software. But to me, I've been saying, get greedy with your vendors. And also your vendor should be able to explain what they're doing. I think that's the two things that happen. And if they don't really want to tell you what they're processing and how, and is it on is it built off a data set? Is it completely generative? What's going on? Halfway, even if you don't understand, do they understand? Or are they pulling it from some other places and it's a black box on top of a black box? So I think there's some places where, I think, Giac, it's hard to kind of rein this in yet, because every vendor is a little different. And I think it's going to be worse when we get to MCPs. Because you're going to have just all the bots will be talking to each other to form an opinion.
Yeah. I think, there's definitely some variance across, use cases and vendors, but there are 4 things that in any AI use case you can ask yourself when evaluating it. I call it the EACH framework. E stands for explainability. It's nothing like rocket science. I framed it in my own way, found an acronym for it. But explainability. So regardless of what the context is, could be market pricing, could be comp planning. One of the questions I always tell people to ask vendors is, they've just shown you that their AI can generate a result and outcome. But does it show you the process as well? Because how it got to that outcome can be more important than the outcome itself, right? So are you able to explain how it got there? That is, in a few words, what the explainability tenet is. Very much close to that is the auditability tenet as well. Let's say you've made, you've used AI within a workflow, and this was 6 months ago. Are you able to go back in time and find an audit trail of what happened? Because for things like pay equity, you're probably going to need it, especially if there's a joint pay assessment looming in. And people are not just asking what, they're asking why. And that why could have happened a year from now, right? That is the confidence tenet, which means we all know that AI modules, they love to lie, and they lie confidently, right? What we do value, however, is an AI that tells us, I'm vulnerable. I didn't know the exact answer to this. I'm 75% sure that this is the right outcome you want, but I might be wrong. Why don't you look into it, the other 25%, and tell me if I'm right? So that is just showing your confidence level, and just having an AI that tells you when they are uncertain.
Those that just turned in at 34 minutes thought they just got onto a dating site, by the way. Lie confidently, but we like vulnerability. Okay, got it. Okay. So I got the C. Yeah.
It's fascinating how men's mind work, because I was thinking about the exact same thing, but I didn't say it.
Yeah. All right. So we got the C, the confidence part. Okay.
And then the H, you probably heard it over and over again, is the human in the loop, which is different from the human on the loop, right? One is, AI human, AI, human. So there's like guardrails in place where the human sort of is summoned. And then there's the human that is monitoring over the entire workflow. And that is a key distinction, especially in the, I love how this sounds so catchy, AI EU Act, which is coming effective in August. That's the key distinction, but probably a bit too much technical to get into right now. But yes, the H stands for human in the loop, and that explains that each framework, because each pay decision needs to go through this framework.
I think it's critical for companies and people inside when they do the ROI on AI that they do the time saved, but also the time added piece. Now it's going to net out as a gain, I assume, or you just shouldn't do it, right? Just like any ROI piece. But to your point, you've got people, in the loop and after the loop, and making sure that audit piece, just to use the A, is there, and show that I was listening, Giac.
Yeah.
That basically that piece is there, and you do the math that says, hey, we're going to save 12 hours, but we're going to spend 4 hours differently. And so the net isn't 12, because I think that's where you're seeing some people on the believability issue. And then they're like, well, it's the same thing with coding, right? You're seeing a lot like it slings Python code amazing, but you have to go back and debug. And so you save a lot of time up front, but the time is spent differently, even though albeit less.
100%. I think what not many people have realized yet is that even if you have the fanciest AI in place, it won't always generate an accurate answer. What it will likely do is generate a consistent answer based on the parameters you've given it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's accurate. So yes, there is potential. There's a risk that we will spend more time than before in vetting the outputs, and maybe at that point you could have done the work yourself. Right?
Well, I think it'll change the work too, because I think the way I've been approaching it, everyone always worries it's going to take their job. And so my answer back to comp teams have been, if you could do your job the way you want to, like not the way you are, but the way you want to, how many heads would you have to add? Because they're already peaked out. Like if there are any comp teams out there with extra headcount, feel free to send a note, but that's a unicorn I haven't seen. So like, that's the piece where I'm always like, if you actually could do what you wanted to, like how many people would it take? And they're like, oh, well, I would need 2 extra people or another extra person. I'm like, okay, here's your thing. You're not getting replaced. You're going to be allowed to work more on the art and crafting the science better than you can just physically do it right now.
Yeah. And, I still haven't formed like a strong opinion on whether roles will like disappear and unemployment will skyrocket because of AI. I think it's too soon to say. I mean, just last year, I recall someone saying consulting is dead. And this year, I mean, my friends that still work in consulting, they're drowning in work. Yeah. So, and then last week, someone came and told me, oh, AI will kill SaaS. I'm like, well, look at where consulting is. They don't seem to be dead, not yet. So I think, it's going to shake up a few things in the market, but it's also going to create new opportunities, right? So yes, we're seeing a slowdown in hiring for junior roles, but is that entirely driven by AI, or is it driven by macroeconomic tensions, outlook? Like it would take a longitudinal study with multi-variable regression, as everything I recall from my statistics classes.
I thought we were going to start talking about regression methodologies. I was so stoked. Yeah.
Well, R squared, bring it on.
Just getting conscious of time a little bit. If you had one tip for people that are trying to get unstuck, what would that be? And then I've got one other question, and then I can't see Paul's face or if he's raising his hand. So
I'll just chime in, man. You're good.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, just give me a call. No, just kidding. But give me a call, not because I want to sell you services. I just have an email address. That's all I have. I don't even have a website. I'm not here to sell anything. But what I am available for is to show you what I'm building. And I think people need to see it, because if we only, I mean, it's great that we're talking about AI, but if we only talk and theorize about it, for the human mind is more challenging to actually grasp the practical opportunity. It is only by seeing that people actually can connect the concept, the theory to the practice. And that's what I've been doing in these user research interviews. Some of time, we spent some time, with questions and answers, and some with, right, here's what I'm building with Cloud Code. You said you were building with Google AI Studio. Let's exchange notes and let's learn from each other. This is how you learn in general. Like, this is management 101, right? It's nothing new, but interestingly, it catches a few people off guard. We just need to do what we've always been doing to learn a new skill, something we've learned since the early days of our life. So yes, my advice would be, start experimenting and don't be shy. Get on a call with other people who are experimenting as well. Show to each other what you're building. Learn from each other's mistakes, and you'll see that things you'll get rid of the blockers pretty soon.
And so we always end, that was great, with if you could automagically, which is a highly technical term not created by AI, automagically fix any one thing in HR, what would it be?
What would I fix in HR? I mean, it's probably going to sound very simple, but I would love, and I think Charlie from Conto would love this. I would love for managers or recruiters to have all the information they need to feel empowered to make to approve or reject an offer, without dragging me in for reasons other than like the advice, like genuine advice. Sometimes they're just looking on a scapegoat, someone to blame.
So my follow-up question would be, every time I've heard this, and jokingly with Charlie some, then the question is, would you automagically make them stay inside that range too? Because giving them the information just means they knowingly, with all the information, decide to
will still do whatever the hell they want.
Automagically make the ranges disappear, because we don't need them anymore in this new, in this parallel world. Maybe, we just make them disappear and trust that humans will make the right decision, and coincidentally will be within the range without even knowing.
I just looked out the window and, I just saw the blue skies, rainbows, a couple of unicorns went by, and a pot of gold at the end. I totally dig it.
He just took the humans out of the loop. That's what I just heard, though. At the same time,
Giac works for Skynet. There's the old reference for those of us. This has been great. So we will post all your information out there. You can obviously reach out to Giac on LinkedIn. Now he can reply to you in email. So like with a professional email. So he's totally moving up. You can tell that it's not difficult to get Giac to talk about his opinion of what's going on and share. He's got a lot of, he's just checking out the market a ton. So feel free to reach out, follow him on LinkedIn. Really appreciate you taking the time, Giac, showing up. Paul, this is by far and away the best video session we've had with you. So I appreciate that today as well. So thanks to everyone listening. Give us a follow, and we'll tag everything.
Thanks, Giac.
Awesome. It was great fun. Thanks, guys.